and in Asia in this context. We've looked at Thailand, North Korea, of course, but also regionalism. We've looked at the ASEAN Economic Community coming up in 2015 and a variety of issues, but it's a real treat to be able to end on this note. And we will conclude at 5:30 today, and then afterwards we kind of have a series wrap-up reception downstairs, down the stairs in the back that you're all invited to if you have time. So the reason I'm particularly interested in Myanmar, and it's been a big focus of our research to date, is obviously it's going through a unique transition. The United States and Japan both have a great stake in Myanmar's future, Myanmar's role in ASEAN, and potentially some ability and influence to help in that transition. Japan, for example, the largest single creditor for Myanmar, and the debt relief agreement was reached back in 2011, which a major component of that was involving representatives from the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA, to work with government officials, to work on building training and capacity program with Myanmar officials to improve governance, management, and development policy, education and health policy, and a variety of areas relevant to today's topic. Japan is the largest aid giver to Myanmar as a single government, and it oscillates back and forth between Vietnam and Myanmar as kind of the single largest recipient of Japanese aid within the Japanese system. USAID reopened its mission in Myanmar in 2012 and outlined its assistance framework in 2013 with a set of objectives that are very similar to those in Japan. And the US and Japan inaugurated a bilateral development dialogue last year. Myanmar is one of the topics there, along with a number of other development topics as well. So we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about that today. So I will we'll start with Nakazawa-san, and then we're very pleased to have Jason Foley here from USAID to offer a US view as well, and then we'll have a little discussion here and open it up to group discussion. I'd like to introduce Nakazawa-san first. Probably very well known to many of you for his 4 years here in Washington, up until last year as the chief representative for JICA here in Washington. When he went back, he served in Tokyo as the Deputy Director General for Southeast Asia and Pacific Department of JICA, where he focused on Myanmar, Vietnam, and Cambodia in particular. He's had a more than 25-year career at JICA, working also in the Japan Bank of International Cooperation, the Overseas Economic Cooperation Fund of Japan, and he has focused quite heavily on loan operations in Asia, ODA operational strategies. He's got a master's degree from Harvard. He's lectured at Japanese universities on development economics, and he's also advised companies operating there. But particularly relevant to today's discussion is we've managed to catch him right before he goes to Myanmar as the new chief representative in Myanmar. And he was also just recently there to participate in the third Development Cooperation Forum in Naypyidaw. So this is a particularly opportune time to hear from him about Japan's approach and strategies vis-a-vis Myanmar, and then we'll move on from there in the alliance context. Nakazawa-san, thank you for coming today, and please, I give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for the kind introduction, and thank you for coming. I learned that snow is expected, so I have to conclude my remarks very shortly. And I'm so happy to be here to return to Washington D.C. And in fact, I'm so happy that I couldn't sleep, and I woke up 2 in the morning today. It's just time lag. As Jim kindly noted, in his introduction, I was here for 4 years. When President Thein took office in 2011, I was here, and he started an impressive range of reforms for democratization and economic restructuring, as everyone knows. I was really excited when then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited Myanmar in December 2011, followed by President Barack Obama's visit there in November 2012. I believe that since then, we have already seen Myanmar some tangible progress, political, social, and economic. 2015 being an election year, it will be a time of assessing and reflecting on the achievement of the Thein Sein government, as well as an opportunity to look ahead to what remains to be done to realize the vision for a new Myanmar. Today, after reviewing what the Thein Sein government did, I'd like to focus on what I consider to be the core development challenges for Myanmar for the decades to come. I will then highlight some of Japanese assistance toward Myanmar and our commitment to promoting reform. It's clear that the reforms started in 2011 are transforming Myanmar. Freedom from fear is reality for the most part of Myanmar now, though the recent conflict in Kokang region may hinder the achievement of nationwide peace. A new economic system has replaced the old. Policy reforms in education and health, backed by significant budget allocation increase for these sectors, have started the process of turning what is mere manpower into human capital, a critical asset for development. Efforts to improve the investment climate are already paying off. Indeed, there was a notable increase in foreign direct investment last year. As the chair of ASEAN in 2014, Myanmar played an important role in hosting ASEAN meetings and promoting increased collaboration between ASEAN and its key partner countries like the US and Japan. The international community very much appreciated the Myanmar government's reform efforts, as well as its active role in coordinating regional collaborations. However, it's also clear that Myanmar still has a long way to go. For instance, on the Human Development Index by UNDP, a broad measure of development, Myanmar ranked 149th out of 186 countries. On the Freedom House Index on Political Rights and Civil Liberties, Myanmar ranks 162nd out of 195 countries. On the World Economic Forum's Global Competitive Index, it ranks 134th out of 144. Of course, Myanmar's reform process is in its early stage. Even so, this is not where Myanmar should be. There is little doubt that Myanmar has huge development potential. Its geographic location, connecting ASEAN, China, and India, its relatively large land mass and population, and its natural resources, including water, are important advantages. A culture of diligence and traditional high literacy rates will benefit Myanmar. Furthermore, many manufacturing industries are now shifting from China and more advanced ASEAN economies to countries that have started to industrialize more recently, such as Cambodia, Laos, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. And Myanmar enters the industrialization scene at an opportune moment, I would say. It should capitalize on this international structural shift in manufacturing and build a foundation for industrial growth. So what is the most important development aspiration for Myanmar? The phrase inclusive development captures it. Inclusive development refers to the kind of growth from which all people enjoy the fruits of growth. To achieve inclusive development, I believe there are 4 requisites. These are 1, political and social inclusion, 2, geographic inclusion, 3, an inclusive private sector, and 4, inclusion in opportunities. To achieve political and social inclusion, we hope that Myanmar will achieve a nationwide ceasefire as soon as possible. This is essential for establishing an environment in which basic public services can be delivered to all corners of the nation. It's also key to enabling the peaceful participation of all ethnic groups in the political process. Effective state building requires a sense of unity or belonging among the people of Myanmar, which in turn demands genuine inclusion. The democratic system must create processes and practices to ensure that decision-making is open and reflects the voices of people and communities through effective participation. Such inclusiveness will strengthen the legitimacy of the state and the political process as a whole. The election this year will be a critical milestone in enhancing social and political inclusion in Myanmar. I hope that, as was committed by President Thein Sein at the third Myanmar Development Cooperation Forum last month, the upcoming election will be free and fair, and that all political stakeholders in the country will participate. Geographical inclusion is about bringing the benefits of development to all of a country's regions. Myanmar's overall growth strategy places much emphasis on improving transportation and market connectivity with neighboring economies. A number of corridors will run through Myanmar and extend into other countries through different gateways. It's relatively easy to connect all states and regions to this core network, and that will raise their economic potential. However, some locations in Myanmar are simply not able to benefit from the current network. For such areas, the government of Myanmar has to make it easier for the residents of those areas to access economic opportunities elsewhere. Either way, improved connectivity will be indispensable to geographic inclusion. In addition, Myanmar should promote international standards in addressing the social and environmental impact of development projects, especially infrastructure projects. Minimizing the negative effects of economic development on people and nature is an important element of inclusiveness. In the economic sphere, there can be no inclusion without economic growth. It is essential to promote the continued growth of competitive manufacturing sectors, high-value agriculture, and innovative service industries. Rapid growth alone, however, will not guarantee inclusiveness. I believe true economic inclusiveness requires the growth of intrinsically inclusive private firms. What do I mean by that? In traditional economies, a small group of individuals controls production chains and profits, with most of the economic gains being made off of low labor costs. This type of economy cannot be inclusive. It benefits only a few. To build an inclusive and prosperous economy, a country needs to create an environment in which innovative and competitive businesses can thrive, one in which the quality and capabilities of workers are valued. All individuals should be able to participate in business activities at their own initiatives. This, I believe, is a key to creating an innately inclusive private sector. Finally, inclusion opportunity refers to providing people with the tools needed to succeed. If many economic opportunities are created, but children are not well educated, they cannot take advantage of them. Therefore, the government must make continued efforts to invest in human capital, including providing a quality education to every child and ensuring access to basic health services. Eliminating the elite special economic privileges is also an important step in opening business opportunities to everyone, another dimension of inclusion. Such a shift will also help stimulate more innovation as well as healthy competition. To address these challenges, Japan, including JICA, has supported Myanmar's efforts under our vision of inclusive and dynamic development. Let me briefly touch upon what we are doing. In our infrastructure development assistance, we put emphasis on long-term engagement and connectivity. Our projects include support to the Tirawa SEZ development project, expected to help increase foreign direct investment and job creation in Myanmar. The improvement of trunk railway between Yangon and Mandalay, and the development of roads, water, and electricity networks in rural areas. We also studied the road improvement study along the corridor connecting Yangon to Thailand. In these types of projects, we support the Myanmar government with institutional development and encourage authorities to implement social and environmental safeguards to mitigate project's negative impact on people and the environment. We have provided considerable assistance to strengthen human capital. Among them are support for industrial human resource development to engineering faculties at Yangon Technological University and Mandalay Technological Universities. Assistance in improving the curriculum for basic education and help rehabilitating medical facilities in rural areas. In addition, the Japanese government has been providing assistance to achieve a ceasefire in Myanmar as soon as possible, to enable ethnic minorities to enjoy the fruits of such ceasefire and to improve people's lives, especially in areas affected by conflict, in line with progress of peacemaking process. We have worked with regional governments to establish regional and community development plans that adequately reflect the voices of people and the communities they belong to. In terms of support for the rule of law, our assistance provides support to judicial organizations and for improving the legal frameworks to govern investment and business environments. During the summit meeting between Japanese Prime Minister Mr. Shintaro Abe and President Wu Tae-sen last November, Prime Minister Abe expressed Japan's continuous commitment to supporting Myanmar's transition efforts. As Japan Development Agency, JICA will continue to support the people and the government of Myanmar. To conclude, I would like to reiterate my belief that Myanmar is a country of huge potential. Now is the time for advancing inclusive and sustainable development. To take advantage of the region's dynamism, it's essential for the government of Myanmar to sustain its strong commitment to reform and to continue on the path toward inclusive development. We know that transformational reforms are very complex and take a long time to produce results. A steadfast commitment and patience are required of both Myanmar and its international partners. I believe that the donor community can and must play an important role in supporting Myanmar's endeavors with both financial resources and knowledge sharing. We take this responsibility very seriously. As long as Myanmar continues its effort of long-term reform and development, both the US and Japan should engage with the effort so that Myanmar can count on our continued support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nakazawa-san. Appreciate that. There's a lot to discuss following that presentation. I'd like to turn now to Jason Foley. We're very honored to have him here with us today. Jason is the Deputy Assistant Administrator at the Asia Bureau at USAID, overseeing East Asia and the Pacific. Prior to that, he served as Director of Strategic and Program Planning in the Bureau of Policy, Planning and Learning at USAID. He's also worked at the State Department, as the budget director for Immigration and Customs Enforcement and as director of strategic planning there, and was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Benin. It's a great pleasure to have you with us here today, so please, I invite you up.
Greetings all. I see some familiar faces, so good to see everybody. Thank you, Jim, for organizing this important event, Mr. Nakazawa, for allowing me to participate with you, and for your good overview of activities in Japan. We appreciate this opportunity also to present what USAID is doing in the country. I just returned from the Human Rights Dialogue, which we held a couple of weeks ago, so the issues we'll be discussing today, most of them were front and center in those discussions as well. The United States, and indeed the people of America, have a fundamental interest in the success of Burma's reforms. And working very closely with the embassy really as one integrated team, USAID follows a principal engagement approach, whereby we engage the people of Burma proactively based on principles of inclusivity, transparency, accountability, and citizen empowerment. And this is not a new approach, but rather a continuation of our long-term promotion of democratic values and human rights in Burma. By listening to civil society, grassroots organizations, and communities, USAID assistance strives to link people to the reform process. That's our main focus. Local ownership or demand is a prerequisite for all our assistance. We don't ask civil society to support our priorities and goals. We support civil society to implement the aspirations of the people in Burma. Therefore, how we do development with civil society is just as important as what we do. So accordingly, USAID, unlike some places, we don't have a traditional development mission in Burma. Rather, our role is to use the tools of development to help the people of Burma deepen and sustain their reforms. So for the rest of my few minutes today, what I'd like to do is provide an overview of our work in civil society, talk about elections, peace process, and then Rakhine State, 3 areas that we think are pretty fundamental to the progress in Burma. So turning to civil society more specifically, people on the ground expect more. We hear this over and over from people that we meet there, and we expect more. Civil society feels that its voice is not always heard, and it is the responsibility of agencies like USAID to help. We recognize that civil society is at the center of the reform process, and we need to ensure the country's transition toward democracy includes a full spectrum of voices, just not the elite. Strengthening civil society is an approach we use in implementing all our activities, including health, agriculture, economic growth, and rule of law. It's not a standalone project, but it's embedded as an approach in everything we do. So some specific examples of the work we do with civil society. So we provided the forum for civil society and the government to engage, to consult on the association registration law, which is a critical piece of law which governs the NGO activity in Burma. We've also been encouraging active, broad-based participation in the land use policy and the subsequent law. It's something I highlighted front and center at the Human Rights Dialogue. There's still concerns and issues around the land, but at least we're getting consultations on putting the policy and law together. We're supporting community development in 2,000 villages, empowering small-scale farmers, and promote small and medium businesses. We are facilitating the establishment of 200 farmer extension groups, engaging nearly 4,500 farmers. We are partnering with over 30 community-based organizations along the Thai-Burma border to deliver basic services to over 1 million displaced people and refugees. Finally, we're helping to strengthen the capacity of civil society and media organizations to participate in the reform process. Last year, we provided assistance to over 300 civil society organizations and 5,800 individuals and trained over 1,000 journalists. So although we have seen some successes, significant challenges remain. As I noted earlier, civil society continues to feel that its voice is not being heard fully, and we agree. For example, the bylaws for the association law, which I mentioned, are not yet complete. The process of inclusive consultation is beginning to happen, but it's not yet ingrained. Shifting to elections. This year's election in Burma will offer a critical test in which to evaluate the country's commitment to reform. Together with the international community, the United States has consistently stressed the need for credible, transparent, inclusive elections that reflect the will of the people. To support the elections, we're doing a few things. One, providing technical assistance to the Union Election Commission. 2, training domestic election observers. 3, supporting voter registration and education efforts. 4, strengthening the capacity of political parties. And finally, increasing dialogue between stakeholders. And relatedly, we're strengthening the legislative, budgeting, and oversight functions of the parliament. In terms of the peace process, the government of Burma and ethnic groups have experienced recent setbacks to reaching a national ceasefire agreement. An eventual ceasefire agreement will be an important milestone, but it should not conclude the reconciliation process. U.S. engagement in the peace process is founded on supporting the process toward national reconciliation as opposed to a predetermined timing or outcome. A nationwide ceasefire would serve as the beginning of an inclusive and transparent national political dialogue, which is essential to the creation of lasting peace and which is many of the issues will have to be resolved. These processes must reflect the values and interests of all people of Burma, including civil society and women. To support the peace process, USAID is currently implementing programs to increase participation and inclusion and address critical impediments to the political transition. In the event of a nationwide ceasefire, we are prepared to provide assistance for ceasefire implementation and political dialogue. Specifically, U.S. assistance will increase trust and confidence among those leading the negotiations as well as public confidence in the process. Our activities will increase public information and awareness and expand civil society participation in peace and national reconciliation efforts. With respect to Rakhine State, the situation remains deeply concerning. Given the humanitarian situation and persisting intercommunal tensions, we have consistently pressed the government of Burma to pursue durable solutions to core problems and create conditions for sustainable peace and development. As I witnessed on my trip last year to Rakhine State, the state's people have a rich cultural history and face deep poverty, in some accounts the poorest state in the country. The United States is committed to broad-based and equitable development with equal justice for all people, but we recognize that the Rohingya are a uniquely disadvantaged population. Unimpeded humanitarian access to those most in need in Rakhine and other places in the country is an international principle and fundamental human right. To support a peaceful resolution in Rakhine State, we are implementing targeted activities that promote conflict sensitivity and mitigation, community dialogue, and trust building. We are also seeking to empower moderates and increase trust, dialogue, and engagement between Rakhine leaders, the international community, and the government of Burma. So in conclusion, the success of reforms will be determined by the impact they have on the daily lives of the people of Burma. Transitions take time, expectations are high, and the challenges are many and substantial, and success is not preordained. But through it all, the U.S. government, through our development assistance, is committed to help the people of Burma participate in, shape, and own their own reform process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Jason. That's a great compliment to Nakazawa-san's presentation. Let's take a few seats here, and we'll begin our conversation and then open it up to the floor for questions to the group. Nakazawa-san. These go on automatically? Do we need to do anything here? The magic of technology. So I'd like to begin picking up on the theme of inclusiveness. That was common in both of your presentations. And you each touched on it a little bit in terms of how your assistance strategies try to promote that, but I wonder if I can draw that out a little bit more. What are the biggest barriers to inclusive development in Myanmar today, particularly thinking about the political and social dynamic given the focus on the election this year? And how do you think your strategies can tackle those big challenges? What are those obstacles? And to the extent this came up in the Cooperation Forum in Naypyidaw, I'd be interested in what some of the other development stakeholders thought.
May I?
Please.
Yes, Jim. The last Myanmar Development Cooperation Forum last month, this is the third one. Main theme was building upon foundations focused toward future inclusive development, which means Myanmar government itself clearly understands inclusiveness is a key for Myanmar to to get on the right track on sustainable development. And there are several barriers to achieving inclusiveness. One big issue, as everyone can understand, is the still there are conflicts between with some ethnic minority groups. And unless ceasefire agreement is made, and as Jason mentioned, ceasefire agreement is not the final part. Political dialogue for an ideal federal union would be the kind of target for both Myanmar government and also ethnic minority groups. But unless ceasefire agreement is made, it's not possible for people in the border areas to get benefit or to enjoy the fruits of this democratization and restructuring of the economy. So in order to achieve inclusiveness, first thing Myanmar government or Myanmar people has to focus upon is the ceasefire agreement, followed by the political dialogue to make that ceasefire permanent. Of course, there are some other inclusion, as I mentioned, private sector's inclusion in opportunities, which Myanmar government is now trying hard to increase resources allocation to health sector and education sector. That's a good sign. But first thing I have to stress upon is the ceasefire in the nation.
Mm-hmm. I'll just add a few points. I think one is to ensure that all voices are heard. All voices have to feed into the reform process, have to shape that. And so, again, civil society, strengthening civil society is a key focus. Two, we have an agriculture program there as part of our food security. And we're targeting the smallholder farmers, ensuring that they are able to freely plant what crops they deem most effective for their family livelihoods, to connect them with the value chain, with the markets. It's got to come from that level and work its way up. And then finally, I would just say the rule of law, and it's something we focus on. Rule of law needs to ensure that there is accountability, there is transparency, and it facilitates a consultative process that often leads to, well, in most cases, leads to a better product than what you started to. And that certainly is the case in that we talked about the NGO association law, where at first the government was somewhat reluctant. Well, why would we engage? We haven't done that way before. And working with them to understand you need that input. In the end, they said, well, this is a better product. This actually worked. And so using those cases, those examples, and having them include more of during the lawmaking process is important.
Is it fair to say then that the Myanmar government is coming around or what is their stance toward this, the emphasis on civil society development? Do they see that as a potential partner in terms of building the country, a potential obstacle or future challenge to governance, or both? How do you manage that reaction from the government side?
I participated in the last month's Myanmar Development Cooperation Forum, and one noticeable change or improvement in this forum, this is the third year, the third forum, was the active participation of civil society organizations. There are 10 divided panel discussions, and many of which are led by the CSOs. And CSO's activities are now, I think, relatively free, and Myanmar also would like to count on them. As Jason mentioned, I have one example of the Tirawar Special Economic Zone development project. And since this is a pretty big development project, there are several, in fact, 81 households who need to be involuntarily settled. And Myanmar government's executing agency try to have a dialogue with those all families, and also try to involve some NGOs to facilitate these activities. So using some project example which would benefit Myanmar, and make them work using the project example for some collaboration with CSOs, NGOs, and interaction with those CSOs and NGOs are quite important.
We just add from where it was 5 years ago, it's light years of progress. I mean, so we have to acknowledge that it really has seen a growth of civil society, and again, for the most cases, the voices can be heard and are considered. So we want to acknowledge that. But as we mentioned, there are still challenges, which is to be expected, but we continue to press and show how important it is to fully engage it on all issues consultatively.
Thank you. Let me bring the U.S.-Japan alliance aspect into this, because a premise of our project or our research is the idea that there is a role to play for the alliance, a potential role to play for both of our benefits and for Myanmar and the region's benefits. My experience in government taught me to be very sympathetic to the idea that alliance cooperation for the sake of the alliance is not necessarily a good thing. Often it just creates more work or more effort, and it doesn't necessarily produce results on the ground. So we need to look for opportunities where alliance cooperation actually produces a net benefit that may not have otherwise been possible. Either it's actual joint action, or it's simply coordinating and exchanging information for more efficient delivery, reinforcing messages with a particular counterpart, et cetera. Based on your experience, and I'm tempted now, especially we have the former JICA chief rep to the United States about to become the JICA chief rep in Myanmar. What's a realistic, practical view to take on the potential for coordination, cooperation, U.S.-Japan alliance collaboration in this regard?
We have already started some collaboration with our counterparts in the U.S. For example, like in health sector, JICA has provided assistance to major infectious disease control project for more than 10 years now, focusing upon HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And I understand USAID, under the Presidential Malaria Initiative, Center for Disease Control worked with USAID, for malaria control. And both parties have similar objectives, and expertise and lessons needed probably would be the same. So this is one of the areas where we can work together. In addition to that, disaster risk management. Myanmar is prone to hurricane and floods type of natural disasters. And this might be another area which we have already started discussing some collaboration. Having said that, as Jim mentioned, collaboration for collaboration, just increase transaction cost and does not necessarily, produce results which, both of us and Myanmar people want. So some, policy level and what strategic levels, coordination or collaboration between the two countries are, first of all, very important. And that should be in line with the Myanmar's development plan, which Myanmar people and the government themselves make. So based upon collaborated strategy or policy framework, real activities or concrete type of activities, how we collaborate, and it has to be decided in the field level. That is what I try to do.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there's the higher level policy strategic coordination. There's the really granular activity level that was mentioned. But then there's the middle, and the middle, particularly in Burma, there is daily coordination between the partners and the donors about what are you doing, what are we doing, how can we complement each other. So that sort of coordination, collaboration happens all the time across the board on all issues. It's just where you're getting a very specific activity of how do you combine platforms and planning cycles and budgeting cycles from one agency and another agency, difficult to really align to show oftentimes a lot of development impact.
Well, then, my last question then, before I open it up, is about the development dialogue. So the U.S. and Japan established this dialogue. It's kind of a 2+2 framework with Assistant Secretary or Deputy Assistant Secretary level, Assistant Secretary level, I believe, from USAID and State Department and JICA and Ministry of Foreign Affairs meet once, twice a year to discuss development strategies and exchange information. How do you evaluate that tool? Is it useful? Can it be improved? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's useful. As Jason also mentioned, policy coordination, need to be made mainly between the capitals, Washington D.C. and Tokyo, and this discussion includes policy level, people in State Department, USAID, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and JICA. So it's very important to kind of to decide the priorities and kind of sequences. But as I mentioned, real day-to-day activities or project type of activities, has to be planned and did in the field level. So kind of combination between the two, the dialogue between the two capitals and field level coordination and co-working is very much necessary.
Nothing to add further.
Yeah, well, I suppose to me what's particularly potentially valuable is getting that foreign policy view or angle connected with the development work that's going on. So you have different perspectives coming together, and especially in the lead up to the election and how we approach that from a diplomatic perspective, and then what impact that has, that may have an impact on some of our programs that we're carrying out. Well, thank you for that. Let me open it up to people who'd like to ask a question. We'll have a microphone come to you, and just let us know your name and affiliation, and ask your question. I'll start here, and then I'll come over here.
Thank you. My name is Kakumi Kobayashi with Kyodo News of Japan, and my question about the question is how to enhance the investment from the whole foreign countries in Myanmar, and I think there's a multilateral project to help Myanmar reform the legislation of the employment and the labor, and I'm wondering any of you in the panel could brief us on the latest development on the international project to reforming the Myanmar's legislation about the employment and labor, and such as what do you think they should be the first priority among the many challenges, I guess, and or how long do you think that project could need to be completed? Thanks.
Thank you. That's actually a good example of something that was announced at, around the APEC time, as I remember, on involving U.S. and Japan and others.
Can I?
Please.
As you mentioned, in the last November, a joint statement was issued among the U.S., Japan, Denmark, and international labor organizations, jointly launching a new initiative to promote fundamental labor rights and practices in Myanmar. And that focuses upon a multi-year labor law reform. Companies which try to make investment in Myanmar or in whatever developing countries are very much keen to know the or avoid the kind of reputation risk. If, for example, like a factory or even the other factories in the same zone, had some bad reputation, let's say child laborers or environmental problems, that would make that other companies also having a negative impact. So that kind of private-driven type of initiative or private driven type of needs need to be also taken into account when government bodies like JICA or USAID when we talk about this type of issues.
So just to add, labor was one of the areas we raised at the Human Rights Dialogue and acknowledged the government's efforts, but there's a lot still to go on implementation. I mean, there's a lot that has to happen, but I guess the other part of how to enhance investment, so labor is one, but accountability, rule of law, these fundamental issues that they're grappling with, those are tackling those are going to help create conditions and foundations that people are going to want to invest in further.
Thank you. This gentleman here?
Yes, my name
Oh,
is...
I have a microphone coming here. Thank you.
my name is Naypyidaw, and I'm not belongs to any other group or politicians or anything. I'm just a regular citizen of America as well as Burma. And then I read these articles from the Mayako that regarding about when we're talking about Japan was giving a lot of financial assistance and loans to Burma since World War II, okay? And then recently Japan has released a lot of loan, $3 billion, and totally we have the $5 billion loan to Burma. And for last 20, 30 years, this $5 billion loan, where is the progress in Burma? And America give a lot of money to Burma, where is the progress? And European country was just giving some money to Burma, where is the progress? Progress means the basic Burmese people, where is the need of water, they need of electricity, they need of good sanitation. We don't have nothing. So something is wrong with aid to Burma.
Well, okay, I'll let the panel respond. Just to clarify, though, some of the debt relief or assistance that was built up over many years was over with previous governments and administrations. The most recent gift was a whole effort at restructuring that debt and essentially trying to get out from under that. But it's a valid question in terms of essentially, well, one of perspective of evaluation and time in terms of what impact we're having or should be having.
I admit to say, several projects we financed or we provided grant assistance to Burma. I mean, before 1987, was not as successful as we wanted, or as Burmese people wanted. But for example, like one of the projects which we assisted in very early years of 1960s was a Baruchan hydro power project, number 2, in Kaya State, which even now, I mean, after 50 years from the construction of the power plant, produced more than 10% of Myanmar's electricity. So there are several, projects which could, generate the benefits which Myanmar people wanted, and Japanese taxpayers also wanted.
And we don't provide direct, United States does not provide direct assistance to the government.
I have a question, or we have a whole bunch of hands up. All the way in the back, and then I'll come up here.
Richard Koo, Mitsubishi Corporation. Jason, you had mentioned that the elections is one of your big priorities. What's your sense on the ground in terms of the people you're working with? Are they optimistic about the elections? Do you sense that they'll fully and eagerly participate in them? Where are we in terms of being ready? And quick question for Nakazawa-san is whether electioneering is part of what your agency is prioritizing as well.
I'm sorry, what is
whether the upcoming elections is part of what JICA is looking at right now.
So, we're working quite hard, as well as a lot of other partners, to support and get them ready procedurally to have the election. I can't speak for all the people of Burma, but my guess is if you talk to them, you will get similar answers to yeah, we think it's going pretty well. Yeah, we think there's challenges. I think our sense is that although quite a challenge, there seems to be buy-in across generally the board about the importance of the elections from the political parties and engagement on all parties in it. So, and that's a healthy, good sign, and we obviously hope that continues.
Japan provides several assistances, in kind of building accountable institutions in Myanmar. And one of them is our assistance to Myanmar Radio and Television, or MRTV. And under this project, we support MRTV, as it begins to change its authoritarian government broadcasters' mentality, so to say, to area, public interest mindset. Try to make public broadcasting as neutral as possible, which serves for the people's benefits. So in addition to that, we have several, projects which supports democratization move, including our support to Supreme Court. Authoritarian government, under the authoritarian government in Asia, tendency is a very strong executive branch, but very weak judiciary and legislative branches. And that needs to be, changed in order for democracy to work and in order for election to be fruitful. So we are providing some assistance first to this, Supreme Court, so that their capacity is built, and some check and balance, among the three branches will work in the future.
Take a final question here, and we have a microphone coming to you.
Hi, Carl Jackson, SICE. When we began this process back in 2010, the people who were trying to gin the process up of providing aid to Myanmar were starting at zero. And what I don't know, and I'd like to be enlightened on, is how much in terms of dollars and cents or yen did JICA actually spend in country in the last 12 months. The same thing with regard to the United States. Where are we actually?
Everybody's
You
doing the
know,
mental figures in the.
Yeah, I don't know whether, Myanmar study from 0 or minus something. Well, at least, people in Myanmar and the government of Myanmar, are trying their efforts, to produce some, development results. As far as, the money spent doesn't necessarily mean, results produced. But having said that, we provide, we committed, not spent yet, about 1.5 billion yen of some development loans to like a Tirawa SEZs, Yangon Mandalay railways, and water supply, rural roads, and electricity in all 7 states and 7 regions, covering all Myanmar. And we also provided, grant assistances amounting like 200 million.
Dollars or yen?
Dollars.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the numbers, as you know, are so hard because there's committed and then there's actually spent, but then you also have the loans, which are a form of assistance. Some of those numbers are huge, but essentially those are going to be paid back because those are for some of the big, larger infrastructure projects.
Yeah, and we take, let's say, 7 to, in the longer case, 10 years to be spent,
Right.
to be constructed.
But the grant assistance is that hard, money spent
To
at the
schools,
grassroots
hospitals.
levels. And Jason, do you have any?
So, all of our budget figures are publicly available. There's bilateral money, there's humanitarian assistance money that's provided in that flows through UN and other organizations. We don't do loans.
Right.
We're on the ground. All of our money is on the ground, being implemented with the people of Burma.
Now, I will say that, and a report that I produced last September has some of the numbers in there, but you have this dynamic where it's not only the United States and Japan, but the World Bank and other international lending institutions and other countries, such that even if the amount of money being spent in the past 12 months is not the whole amount committed, it's still actually, in many ways, overwhelming the capacity of Myanmar to kind of process that and receive it. There's questions about, is it adversely impacting the exchange rate? And so there's all kinds of factors to consider, but it underscores the complexity of the problem and the benefit of all this coordination and communication, both in Myanmar and among the capitals. Unfortunately, we've got a hard stop to our conversation, but I hope we'll have a chance to continue this perhaps in the next series of our program. I want to thank Jason for being here with us today, and Nakazawa-san for traveling all this way, and we wish you the best in your new assignment there. And thank you all for joining us, and as a reward you get some wine and food downstairs, so please join us. Thank you very much.